Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to your end of the week cozy horror with me, Dr. Plague. Let's get you on the right foot to enjoy this upcoming weekend. I've got great stories, a warm fire, and lots of time spent together with you. The theme for today's cozy horror is woodland sights, so let's have a look and see what we can find out in the woods. Starting off strong, we've got some kids in the woods finding strange sights and telling stranger tales. So, let's start things off with the cabin in the woods. The four of us hunkered behind the fallen tree, looking through the binoculars in turn as we surveyed the cabin that had been abandoned for as long as we could remember, and now suddenly there was a candle burning in the window. This had been a summer to remember for sure, and it would become a summer that none of us would forget. Richie, James, Terry, and I had been friends since kindergarten, and we had spent every summer playing around the neighborhood and having fun. This summer, however, was special. We were 11 this year, or close enough to make no difference, and some of the restrictions had been taken off of us. We could ride our bikes a little farther, stay out a little closer to dark, and explore the woods around our house, as long as we weren't in a group. The woods had been a source of restricted adventure for us, and now we were free to explore them as we chose. The first day of summer, we all met at my house with backpacks and camping gear so we could start exploring. Terry had paper and intended to make a map. Richie had brought some of his dad's tools so we could make forts or little bases in the woods. James had the nose of his air rifle poking out of his bag, and I had my wrist rocket hanging from my back pocket. We felt like explorers preparing to head out into the unknown territory, and we just knew that this would be a summer to remember. We began by exploring the places we knew in the woods, places our dads had taken us camping, or our parents had let us go to on our own. Terry made a crude little map for us to follow, and as the summer unfolded, the map got bigger and bigger. Soon the small camp and the creek were joined by the berry bushes, the big rock, the snake sighting place. We had seen a big black snake there, but it had slithered away. And of course, the cabin. The cabin was the oldest thing we had found in the woods. It seemed to be abandoned, but it was so well maintained that it had to be owned by someone. The land was well kept as well. There was no trail either, and the trees would have made even a small car difficult to get in there. We figured it was some forest dweller's summer cabin or something, and we left it alone. We had other things to occupy our time, though, and the cabin was soon forgotten about. We spent the first month of summer building forts and making rafts so we could sail down the creek. We thought we might play pirates if we had a raft, and we started lashing some of the big logs together with some rope from my dad's shed. We made a sail from some old bed sheets. The raft was laughably small. Only one of us could have fit comfortably on it at a time, but we still had fun imagining the four of us sailing up the creek to the small lake that led to it. On July 1st, the first weekend of high summer, we asked our parents if we could camp out in the woods for the weekend. We'd all been in Boy Scouts for a few years, and we'd all gone camping before out there. We felt that we could probably survive in the woods with some food to cook and some shelter to keep the elements off. To our surprise, our parents agreed, on the grounds that we did not camp too far in the woods, and we marked our map where we would be so they could find us. "No more than a mile into the woods," my dad had said, "and you make sure to clean up after yourself so you don't attract anything you can't handle." So we packed our knapsacks and prepared for a weekend in the great outdoors. We hadn't realized how close we were to the cabin when we set up camp, but when Terry had come back with firewood and told us about the candle burning, we had discovered that we were only about 20 minutes from it. We had all been sent out on such errands, and Terry was the last one to return. I had been setting up the tents, Richie had made the journey to the creek for water, James had been digging the latrines we would use, and Terry had been getting firewood. It was getting on in the afternoon when he finally arrived, and the hot dogs in the cooler were calling our names. He dropped the firewood and told us we had to come see this. So here we were, watching the cabin for signs of life. Other than the candle, there wasn't much to see. There was no vehicle in front of the cabin, no lights on in the house, and had it not been for the candle, it would have been just as cold and abandoned as it always was. As it grew darker and no lights came on inside either, we kind of lost interest in the cabin and returned to our campsite. It had been a momentary curiosity at best, but our stomachs were grumbling and and we were ready for dinner. As the darkness settled in, we had our weenies on sticks and roasting nicely over the fire. We had begun chatting about the adventures we would have this weekend, and the laughter around our fire was loud and merry. James had put some root beer in the cooler, and we were breaking out the Jiffy Pop as we prepared to tell ghost stories. Ghost stories were a huge part of any campout, and we meant to outdo each other with our tales of terror that would rival anything we had ever read. "I got one," Terry said, letting his hot dog slowly burn into a charcoal lump. "I read it online. This guy lives with his grandpa, and he said his friend turned into a tree." Terry laid the story out, building up as he told us about the kids exploring the woods and finding a special grove. We all listened, leaning in a little as he wove his tale. The story wasn't really scary, as much as it was sad, but the atmosphere of the dark woods made it all seem pretty spooky nonetheless. I was reaching to get a second hot dog, the first one having been eaten in 3 quick bites, when I thought I heard something out in the woods. It sounded big, bigger than us at least, and I took out the little flashlight I had and shone it into the woods. James looked up from spearing another hot dog, craning his neck to look into the spot my flashlight was illuminating. "Something out there?" he said. Not sure, but I thought I heard something." All of them turned to look, eyes peering into the murky blackness, but whatever it had been was either still or had moved on. "I've got one," said Richie. "It's pretty scary, though. I hope you guys can handle it." We all laughed, throwing a few marshmallows at him, before he leaned in and started his story. There were 4 friends out on a camping trip. They were staying the night in the woods, just their sleeping bags and the fire to keep them safe against the elements. Well, they felt all the night like something was watching them, so they decided to set a watch and make sure that nothing snuck up on them. They would each keep watch for 2 hours while the others slept, and as the others settled in, the first boy sat and watched that night. The fire crackled as we listened, and I thought I heard the snap of a twig again. Was something out there? Was it stalking us? It sounded big, but I suppose it could be a deer or a possum or something. The story isn't about him, though. The story isn't about the second boy either. This story is about the third boy, the boy who must watch through the depths of the night. The second boy had no sooner shaken him awake than he was curled in his sleeping bag and snoring happily. The third boy had slept for a few hours, but he was still tired. He didn't like staying up late, and was used to being snug in his bed when the sun went down. He sat by the fire, the warmth wafting up into his face, and he felt warm and comfy as he began to drowse. I heard a stick crack to my left, and I cut my eyes in that direction. Just then, something stepped on a branch out in the woods, and the boy found his drowsiness melting away. What was that? Some sort of animal? A person? A monster coming to eat him? The boy sat up a little straighter, but he was so tired, he could barely keep his eyes open, and the fire felt so good. I could see something out of the corner of my eye, but I couldn't be sure what it was. An animal? A person? A monster come to eat us up? He looked around, but he could see nothing. The small fire did little to light the forest around him, so he reached for more wood and began to build it up again. His hands shook with each piece he grabbed, and the coals danced as he slid the fresh logs into the flames. He soon had the fire raging, a burning pyre that threatened to catch the lower branches of the nearby trees on fire, but still, he could see only the vague outline of what stalked him. Whatever it was, it looked big like a bear, maybe even bigger. It had a towering presence that made it appear monstrous in the dancing light of our campfire. It appeared to be wearing clothes, but I couldn't be sure. Was that a dress? Maybe a robe? I couldn't be sure, but it was coming closer as we all sat raptly and listened to Richie's story. The boy watched the shape as it stalked closer, unable to tell what it might be. It was so big, it could be anything. A bear, a person, anything could be out in those dark woods. He took one of the burning sticks from the fire and held it out before him like a torch, trying to ward off whatever this diabolical creature might be. It came on heedless of the burning stick, and the boy began to scream as it stepped out into the firelight, and he caught sight of his stalker. This creature wasn't quite so bold. It hung back slightly, not daring to get close enough to be seen. When they found the boys, all of them had been killed. Of the 3 that had been in the sleeping bags, nothing was ever found, just a lot of blood soaked into the bags themselves. Of the watcher, however, they found him still at his post. He leaned in, the fire making his face look sinister. He was frozen in fear, his heart having stopped from terror. I turned then, looking over Terry's shoulder and into the woods, but whatever it had been was gone now. "Wow," James said, putting a fresh marshmallow on to replace the one that had fallen into the fire as he listened. "That was a great story." "Yeah," I agreed, scouting around behind him for shapes. "Bet I know who scared him so bad," James said, a little smile on his lips. "I bet it was Soap Sally." A chill ran up my spine. "Don't even say her name out here," I quavered, the others looking just as shocked. Soap Sally was not something to be joked about in the woods at night. Soap Sally was a local legend, a washerwoman who had done her washing at the watering hole for as long as anyone could remember. She made her own soap, made her own candles too, and was said to be able to make spells and potions as well. When she was found to be making soap out of the bones of runaway children, she was burned as a witch with only the briefest of trials. She was still used as a way to scare bad kids into doing what they were supposed to be doing, and there were still disappearances from time to time that weren't quite explained. I heard a rumor that those kids who went missing in the next town were taken by Soap Sally, James continued, clearly intending to milk the story for all it was worth. "James," I started, but I tensed when I heard a stick snap too close to our campsite. I heard she found them out past curfew and just snatched them up. They ran, of course they did, but she got them, one by one, and took them back to her lair to make them into soap. From behind James, a shape rose, a looming shadow that seemed to grow from the ground. I gasped, looking at Terry and Richie as it rose to 6 feet tall. Their mouths were hanging open, their eyes as big as dinner plates, and James clearly thought we were scared of his story. Then she hacked them up and boiled off the fat. She made them into soap, and then their parents found the soap the next day, and they used it to wash their hands. They never knew they were washing themselves with the bodies of their dead kids, and somewhere that old crone just laughed at them. As they mourned their loss, she laughed and laughed, stalking the night as she looked for more children to... But he noticed us crab-walking away from him and rolled his eyes in laughter. "Oh, come on, guys, it's just a story. Quit goofing around," and... But he gasped as her long black nails clenched his shoulder. When the monstrous woman bent down, her mouth of sharp teeth grinning much too wide, he began to scream like a stuck hog. We all screamed then, running into the woods like bullets fired from a gun. James screamed behind us, begging us to help him. But we were only 10 or 11. What could we do against something like that? We all stayed together as we realized that my house was the closest, and we ran for it. The moon was high and bright, and if it hadn't been nearly full, we'd have likely never found our way home. The woods we had so often played in seemed sinister, a child's fairy tale story, and we wanted to reach the safety of home before the witch could scoop us up and gobble us down. Every limb that grabbed our shirts was a witch's claw. Every hole that yawned to stop us was a hand coming up to catch us, and every sound was that horrid creature in hot pursuit. When we broke the tree line and made it to the row of fences that marked our neighborhood, we all breathed a little easier. My dad was having a beer on the back porch when we got there, and it seemed that Richie's dad had decided to join him since they were both childless for the night. It was only about 9:30, and both of them looked up expectantly as we ran in. "You boys get spooked by a deer already?" my dad joked, realizing then that we were one short. "Where's James?" I sobbed as I tried to catch my breath, and Dad must have caught enough to understand that someone had taken James. He got us all inside and called the police, Richie's dad calling James's parents as he did. Before long, everyone's parents were there, and the men had begun searching the woods. Dad wanted to take us with him, but we all refused to go. We'd had a scare, and when the police arrived, the whole group took to the woods to find James. They came back a few hours later to tell us that there was no sign of him at our campsite. "Is there anywhere that you can think of where he might be, boys? Maybe somewhere in the woods where this person might have taken him?" He said person because they had refused to believe any kind of Soap Sally talk. They wanted to keep this in the real world, and that meant that if a woman had taken an 11-year-old boy against his will, then they were likely close. "The cabin," Richie almost hissed, looking to us for support. "Remember? We saw the candle burning there earlier. Maybe it's her cabin." We showed them on the map where the cabin was, and they told us to stay here as they all went to investigate. They were gone for about an hour when I heard the back door open and the 4 dejected fathers of my group come shuffling back in. They told the 3 of us to head up to bed so they could talk. but we hunkered at the top of the stairs and listened as they told what they had seen. James's mother cried a lot, his father holding her tight. The police were still there, and the sheriff had called in more deputies from the neighboring town. They were searching the cabin from top to bottom. They had found the door unlocked, and when they had gone inside, they had found that the cabin wasn't just someone's summer home. There was blood, so much blood, and the police had found the remains of children in that place. Bones, clothes, skin, hair, a bowl of fat that had yet to be rendered into tallow. The kitchen had several items for making soap, and they'd said the stove was still hot when they arrived. They'd found a shirt on the top of the pile, and James's father had identified it as the one James had been wearing when he'd left home that afternoon. They searched those woods for 3 days, but they never found James. Well, not until he appeared on his parents' doorstep one morning. I was eating dinner that night, still reeling from what I had been through in the woods, and Mom was talking about how wonderful it had been that the community had come together to support James's family. I went to take her a casserole this morning, and she was going through the gifts that had been left by the town. There were casseroles and gift cards and grocery bags and even a nice bag of soap from someone. My mouth went dry when I heard that, and I asked her what she meant. Well, someone had delivered a bag of soap this morning. They looked really great, handmade and so smooth. She told me I could have some if I wanted. I left it in the upstairs bathroom if you guys want to use it. My mom stopped talking when I started hyperventilating. I don't think the police took us seriously at first, but once they did whatever they did with the soap and found bone fragments in it, they started taking us a lot more seriously. James's mother was hospitalized after that, going into a full-blown catatonic state, and the search was redoubled as they tried to find the killer. That was a long and strange summer, full of curfews and lots of dads riding around on neighborhood watch detail as they took kids from summer school to home or to and from summer events. They never found the woman that took James, but my friends and I never expected they would. We never went into those woods again. It's been years since the campout, but sometimes I still look at the woods from the back porch and can swear I see the specter of Soap Sally as she looms at the edge. I graduate high school this year, and I think I might just get as far away from this town and my childhood as possible. I can't imagine raising a kid in a place where they can wind up as bricks of soap on your front porch. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. Well, look at that. Yet another Soap Sally story. She's becoming quite a specter on this show, and I don't think she'll be going away anytime soon. But before we go away, let's go ahead and thank our patrons. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Xaronan and Emily Coltsfoot for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributor. And thanks to Glenn Jenkins for being our Ghost Rider tier contributor. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. Patrons of all levels have a ton of great stuff they get, as well as getting their spooky a day early on a Tuesday or a Thursday. If you'd like to support the show in other ways, I've got a book out. There's a link in the description, so come on down and buy it. Compilation 4, Sleepless Nights, should hold many familiar tales if you're a fan of the show, so what are you waiting for? Come on down and see what all the fuss is about. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening. There's nothing quite like a good camping story, or a good story about time spent in the woods, to make me want to load up my truck and go spend time in nature myself. Is it the same for you? I hope so. I'd like to hope these tales haven't put you off your time in the woods. Moving right along, we have a tale about some impetuous youths who are out looking for something a little different, something a little strange, so that they can record it and add it to their collection of oddities. So let's hear a story about the Woodland Seat. Everyone had heard of the throne, but very few people had ever seen it. The Woodland Seat was something of a local legend. If you follow the river into the woods, turn east at the huge rubber tree at the fork, and walk into the setting sun, you'll come to the Devil's Clearing. In the clearing, a place where nothing is said to grow, sits a chair of stone. If you sit on the chair, you'll be cursed by the devil himself for all time. It's a story I've heard since I was old enough to go to sleepovers, and it's a story I've always wanted to prove or disprove. People have gone into the woods, and I remember the first time someone showed me shaky cam footage from a camcorder of a weird stone chair with faces carved into it. It was later proven to be a fake. The chair was something they'd made themselves and shot at night, but other people claimed to have gone into the woods and found it, their videos proving either better or worse than that first bit of wobbly cinematography that I watched on a couch at my friend John's house. But they all fed the fire of my enthusiasm. It's always been my dream to see it, the real seat. And when Mrs. Raggles assigned us a final project about urban legends for senior English class, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. The assignment was actually about the cause of urban legends, and she wanted us to make our own. When I asked if we could make our project a search for the Woodland Seat, she looked almost tickled. This wouldn't have anything to do with John's senior project for AV, would it, she asked, giving me a little wink. It might, I hedged, as good as telling her our intentions. John and I have been friends for years, and his interest in movies, especially making them, has been ongoing since the two of us were in elementary school. John got his first camera when he was 6, some cheap thing that his dad had picked up from Toys R Us after John practically begged him for it. I'd say John definitely got his money's worth, because we spent the next 4 years making our own short films and epic movies in the backyard. Through the years, John's cameras may have changed, but his interest in filmmaking hasn't. He often calls on me and our friends, Sean and Fred, to star in his latest project, and this would be no exception. I got enough battery packs and memory cards to reward for 3 straight days, he told us as we sat in his garage and suffered through his pitch meeting. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to shoot the next found footage masterpiece. John's project, his senior film thesis, was about urban legends too, specifically their place in horror films. He wanted to make the Woodland Seat the antagonist in his new found footage movie, the witch in his Blair Witch Project, in other words, and use us as his bumbling teen cast that goes looking for it. I was looking forward to using this trip to write my own paper for Mrs. Raggles, but Sean and Fred were just looking for an excuse to go camping for a few days in the lush woods that surround our town. We'd all grown up in the area, and the woods weren't unknown to us. We all enjoyed camping, right up until the first winter chill sent us back inside every year. And I, too, was looking forward to spending some time in the woods, cooking hot dogs and s'mores as we told stories and just hung out this weekend. So when we told our parents we'd see them Monday night and headed into the woods Friday afternoon, we were prepared to spend the next 3 days in nature. We had plenty of food, plenty of water, and we were properly prepared with a 4-man tent and sleeping bags. It was April, and the weather was already becoming unseasonably warm, so we didn't think we needed anything too strenuous. John was carrying his film equipment, his camera already out, and the 3 of us were carrying the stuff we would need for camping and survival, acting as his trusty pack mules. As we came to the river, the surface frothing with the late-season snowmelt from the nearby mountains, John told me this would make a great place to film the intro. The river is, after all, the first leg of the journey. From here, we set out to find the Woodland Seat and write our names for all to see across history. I'll never forget the grin that spread across his face at that moment. It was a golden moment, but nothing golden is made to last. He counted me down as I stood beside the river, preparing to give my lead-in statement. Fred and Sean had unanimously decided that I would do most of the speaking lines for this little movie. Neither of them really wanted to learn any of the lines that John wanted read, and I had the most video-worthy narration voice, they said. I think they just wanted to goof off on our camping trip, but, to be fair, so did I. This is the Leftree River, the start of our journey. I wasn't sure I could even be heard over the rushing rapids, but John gave me a thumbs up, and I struggled on. Legend says that if you follow the river until you come to a huge old rubber tree, you turn east and walk into the woods until dusk, you'll come to the Devil's Clearing and find the Woodland Seat. Those who sit on it are cursed, tormented for all eternity for daring to sit where the devil himself once took rest. Tonight, we intend to find that seat. And cut, John said, hitting the stop button as he nodded slowly. Very nice. Love it. So what happens if we don't find this rubber tree? Sean asked as we shouldered our packs and headed deeper into the woods. I guess we just wait till we find the fork in the river, I said, after thinking about it for a few seconds. What if we don't find that? Fred asked, taking a sip from his water as the leaves smushed wetly beneath our feet. Boys, you're missing the point, John said. Which is, Fred asked. The point isn't to find the Woodland Seat or not. We're here to follow the instructions and see if we find anything or not. That's the project. The legend is what brought us here. The power of the urban legend itself. And now we seek to learn where it can take us. Fred laughed. So this could all be a wild goose chase is what you're telling us. I snorted and bumped him with my shoulder. You're getting a 3-day vacation out of it, Fred. Buck up. We followed the river as the afternoon rattled on. The woods were nice this time of year. Summer was on the cusp of arrival, and everything was green. The water would be too cold for swimming, though I suppose Sean might try. Sean liked the cold. He was built for it, and he would probably take a swim tomorrow before we set off. None of us figured we would make it to the Devil's Clearing by sunset today. We'd set up camp, cook some dogs, do some fishing, and tomorrow we'd proceed on. We were camping, after all, so what was the point of hurrying? We walked most of the first day. We weren't going very fast. We'd been at school all day, and we weren't in any real hurry anyway. Monday was a holiday to boot, and our parents knew where we were and wouldn't expect us home till Monday night. We talked and joked, the usual high school boy banter filling our afternoon. But as the sun began to set, we started looking for this tree or this fork. We had been assured that this was the way to go by some kids who had totally been to the Devil's Clearing, and that too was part of the project. If we couldn't find our way by the urban legend alone, then what was the point? It was starting to get dark when we came to the rubber tree. It had to be the one from the stories. For one, it was huge. It was far larger than any normal tree I'd ever seen, and the leaves left very little mystery about its type. It was also smack in the cleft of the river, the water diverting east and west from there, and it seemed like a good place as any to set up our tent. Sean started assembly as Fred and I went to collect firewood. We left John to set up our fire pit and returned with wood to find the pit dug and the tent already erected. As proper dark fell around us, we filled the woods with the smell of roasting weenies, canned chili, and s'mores. So how do you reckon the chair curses you? Fred asked, blowing the fire off his blackened hot dog before laying it across a piece of white bread. Dunno, John said, around a mouthful of meat, and I just shrugged. I thought you were the expert here, Sean said to me, as he closed his s'more into the metal sphere he used to toast the whole edifice. I mean, I know the chair is supposed to sit in the clearing, but I don't actually know anything about what it does. There are no stories about how it curses you, so I guess no one's ever been stupid enough to try to sit in it. Or, John said after swallowing his bite, it's so bad that it stops anyone from talking about it. We discussed it a little more as the night went on, but as the food was packed away and the fire was doused, we all retired to our sleeping bags for some much-needed rest. I think all of us thought about the seat a little as we drifted off, but it was hard to focus on much after such a long day of hiking. The next day was spent swimming in the river, fishing, going over what we would do that night. John explained how we would come on the clearing at dusk, the sun making a great backdrop for the film. Sean would sit in the chair, pretend to get possessed or something, while the rest of us ran into the woods. There'd be lots of heavy breathing and shaky cam, and then we would begin recording once we had got back to camp. We'll explain how Sean went missing, and then we'll stage some weird noises or something as we record inside the tent. What happens if we find the chair before dusk? Fred asked. Then we stop or make circles till the time is right. What happens if we don't find the place at all? Fred asked. John shrugged. We shoot a piece saying that our search was fruitless and that the legend remains just that. So, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, we set off towards it. From the start, today's hike seemed different. The walk yesterday had been filled with talk and jokes, but today the wood seemed to scowl at the noise we were bringing into its depths. I didn't know right away if the others noticed, but I started to believe that they felt it too. Sean had tried to initiate jokes more than once, but ended up looking around guiltily when the laughter became too loud. Fred was the same way, shushing us more than once before looking around as if to ask why he had done that. John was oblivious, of course, his camera taking it all in as we plotted. If anything, he probably thought we were playing into his vision and was glad for the implied tension. I found myself watching the sun as it rode lower and lower in the sky, not sure if I was dreading being in these suddenly silent woods or finding the thing I'd always wanted to see. The closer we got, the more sure I was that we would find it, and that scared me. I could believe that the devil had come to this place, could believe that he had walked this very path, and I found myself looking down as if I were looking to see hoof prints. No bird song graced this place, none of the usual sounds from insects as they anticipated nightfall, and the silence was unnatural. The woods were lush, the trees thick, but the whole place felt wrong. I didn't have a word for it at the time, but I do now. The word I was looking for was blighted. When do we get to this thing? Sean asked as he wiped his forehead. He turned to look at me, but I just shrugged. It said we walk towards the sunset, and then you find it. Well, it better hurry up, Sean said. We're losing the light, and we'll be setting up camp in the dark in another hour. The sun was getting low beyond the trees, and I realized he was right. The story had never actually said how far you had to walk, just that you had to follow the setting sun. Who knew how far one would actually have to go, or how long you'd have to slog before you got to the seat? We walked for another 20 minutes or so before we began to see something ahead, something that thinned the trees as we walked. The shadows were gathering as we approached the clearing, and it seemed that they gathered around the large and intimidating chair. Holy shit, John breathed. It is real. Boy, was it ever. The chair was roughly 5 feet tall and as wide as a lazy boy recliner. It looked to be made of concrete, set with carvings of gems that were painted on by a deft hand. Across the back of the chair, right where a person's back and head would sit, were 3 gray faces with red eyes and open mouths. They all looked identical, but the more I looked, the more I realized how different they all were. One appeared to be crying, another laughing, the middle one simply scowling. The whole construct looked like it would be at home in a mini-golf course or a weird maze attraction, or even a temple found randomly in the middle of the woods. It looked as out of place in the clearing as a dining room set, and as much as I wanted to see it, I couldn't bring myself to get too close to it. It was wrong. Its very essence was foul, and I couldn't comprehend why I'd ever wanted to find this thing in the first place. As John recorded the thing, he pulled his eye away long enough to wave his hand and try to get Sean's attention. He wanted him to go sit in the chair, as they had discussed, and the fact that he was still standing there frustrated John. Sean, for his part, seemed willing enough to comply, but was unable. He was frozen in place, staring at the chair as if he had never seen a chair before in his life, and John pointed at him and then back at me as he tried to get him to go. Sean shuddered as I shook him, looking at me almost dreamily as I got his attention. "Go sit in the chair," I whispered, and Sean nodded slowly as he approached it. He was stopped, however, when Fred pushed him out of the way and made to plant himself on the seat. "What the hell is he doing?" John whispered. I didn't know how to answer him. The two struggled with each other, and the fight would have looked theatrical if I didn't know they weren't acting. Both of them had this blank look, the kind of look you got when you're listening to someone on the phone while you do something else. Fred won their little scuffle, shoving Sean back hard enough to make him fall on his butt, and claimed his prize. He took his seat on the throne, a look of deep satisfaction stretching across his face that slowly became something more exalted. Sean just sat there, looking at him with ambivalence, and as John stepped towards him, something happened. As he sat there, basking in the glow of his newly won seat, Fred's skin began to blister. At first it was just general reddening that I nearly missed in the diminishing light. It was something I could have set aside as just sunburn until the blisters began to appear. His arms and face broke out, the pus-filled sores growing and bursting in fast motion. The blood and pus ran down his arms and the seat of the chair, and as the sun set, his skin began to boil off his bones. He looked like the guy from Raiders of the Lost Ark as his bones began to show through his skin, and as he basked in whatever glow he was experiencing. As he liquefied in the Woodland Seat, I saw Sean get up and shove Fred's distinctly drippy skeleton out of the chair so that he could take its place. I tried to stop him. I called his name as I came towards him, but he showed no hesitation in the face of Fred's sacrifice. I looked back at John, expecting abject horror, but he had taken the camera away from his eye, and I could see him crying as he watched Sean begin to redden. Not crying in terror or anguish. That would have been easily explained. John was crying in exultation, like a priest who's seen the face of God. John, we have to go now," I said, shaking him. He didn't seem to hear me. He had eyes only for the quickly blistering Sean. John, I yelled, shaking his arm. "We got to get away from here. We need to tell someone what happened. We need to get Sean out of that thing. We need to..." But when I turned back, it was already too late. Sean's skin was melting off his bones, the white already visible, and as his eyes liquefied in his sockets, I tried to pull John away. "John, please," I begged. "Please, we don't have to do this. Don't." But he was already walking towards the chair. As it finished with Sean, he shoved the skeleton out of the seat and sat down amongst the goo and the rot that lay there. That was when I noticed something else. Something I hadn't until Sean's skeleton hit the earth. Fred's bones had disintegrated into powder. A powder that was already being taken away by the forest breeze. I started to run, but something caught my eye before I could get out of the clearing. I saw the camera, the little handheld that John brought into the woods, and I scooped it up before beating a hasty retreat. I fled like a coward, leaving my best friends behind, and I prayed I would never see that cursed chair again. I stumbled through the woods for 3 days, eating whatever I found and drinking from the stream when I finally got back to it. I wished many times that I had picked up one of the bags on my way back out of the clearing, a tent or some food at least, but all I had was the camera and the clothes on my back. I thought about the tent many times as I lay shivering on the damp forest floor, watching the trees for anything, the shadow of the chair, maybe the walking corpses of my friends. I wasn't sure which I was more afraid of seeing, but I just knew that both would be after me before I could escape. When the search party found me on Tuesday, I was afraid my fears had come to pass. They took me to the hospital, but when the police tried to question me, I just handed them the camera and trembled in the face of their questions. That was years ago, nearly a decade, but it's something I never forgot. I haven't seen the footage I gave the police. I have no desire to. The officer who reviewed it said it was the most disturbing thing he'd ever seen, but it did exonerate me of the crime. I think they might have been planning to look further for the bodies of my friends, but after seeing that tape, they scrapped the idea. There was no sense in looking for kids who were no longer there, and less sense in risking officers who might decide to have a seat as well. I lost my best friends that night. Sometimes it feels like the chair cursed me after all. Everyone in town assumed I had something to do with their disappearance, though they never got up the courage to say it to my face. I ended up leaving town to attend college, and I've never seen any reason to go back. Kids, however, still go missing in those woods. I can't help but wonder how many of them are lost to the Woodland Seat. So if you find a strange chair in the forest, steer clear. It's made for only one occupant, though it will gladly accept you as long as you can bear it. Listen to that fire. There's nothing quite like a crackling fire, especially if you're outside amongst nature, roasting hot dogs or roasting marshmallows, or just using it as a backdrop to all the sounds that inhabit that space. Speaking of things that inhabit that space, let's hear a story about some kids out on their own camping. Some kids who encounter something under the Trestle Bridge. It was just supposed to be another camping trip, like so many others we had gone on before. The town we live in isn't huge, but it does have a lot of woodland to explore. We live on the edge of what most people call Appalachia, and we've had more than one weird experience out in the woods. Once, as my friends and I walked down a familiar trail, we smelled a strong and unpleasant scent. Brian thought it must be a bear, but I'd smelled bears before. We'd had one winter under our back porch one year, and this was very different than the musty smell he had left come spring. Another time, while we were camping, we saw ghost lights in the woods. They were beautiful, red and blue and yellow and orange, and though Justin was afraid of them, I felt drawn to go and see them so I could see them better. I knew better, though. Grandma had told me all about the dangers of following the ghost lights, and had assured us all that we wouldn't like where they took us. The land of fairies is beautiful, but also terrible for mortals to behold. They would make you young for the rest of your days, though that might not be as long as you might think, she always said with an evil grin. We'd heard whistling and strange growls, throaty yells and strange birds, but none of it ever really scared me. The woods had always been a friendly place, a place of adventure, and I always looked forward to my time there. I never felt uneasy when I was within its borders, and as the four of us prepared to go back into the woods for another camping expedition, I was excited. Brian's brother had told us about an old trestle bridge deep in the woods, and we all wanted to see it. It was part of the old railroad, something that hadn't run through the town in a long time. The tracks were still there, the old station too, but the trains had mostly been for passengers, and we had none these days. No one came in, no one left, and we had no industry for the trains to transport. All the wood we harvested went to the sawmill or the paper mill, and there was no need to transport it by rails. The Trestle Bridge hadn't seen a train cross in 20 years. It spanned a small gorge in the middle of the forest. Brian said his brother had claimed the bridge was where high school kids went to drink beer, and now that we were freshmen, we should go out there too. He said it was a rite of passage, and that we should go see if the right had decided to leave us a gift out there. We didn't know what sort of gift that would be, but we were all curious to see the bridge. So we told our parents that We were going camping one weekend in April and took to the woods. Brian and I were eager, talking about how cool it would be to see the bridge, but Justin and Frank seemed hesitant. Well, that wasn't quite true. Justin was hesitant, as he almost always was, and Frank was kind of ambivalent. We had met Frank last year at the start of 9th grade, and he had made a pretty good addition to our trio. Frank wasn't an avid hiker, but he liked to hang out in the woods and get a little high from time to time, and that was good enough for us. He also brought outstanding camp snacks, so we were more than happy to hit the trail with him. I wasn't certain there was a sleeping bag in that rucksack of his, but I could already hear the crinkle of chips and snack cakes within it. Any idea how far this bridge is? Justin asked, plodding along grumpily. Justin didn't mind hiking, but he wasn't big on aimlessly wandering in the woods. He had packed enough to make up for Frank's lack of gear, and the tent poked over his left shoulder. He was plodding along at the back of the group, and I was sure we'd have to listen to a fair amount of complaints before we got there. My brother says it's about 3 miles into the woods, following the river until we come to the gorge. After that, it should be pretty easy to find. And if your brother's playing a trick on us, if he's just, messing with us, and we walked for 3 hours into the woods for nothing? Brian rolled his eyes. Then we have a fun little adventure to talk about when we go to college, don't we? Justin grumbled about having to walk 3 miles into the woods, but he couldn't have picked a better day for it. The weather was perfect, a slight breeze keeping the early summer heat at bay. The clouds overhead looked a little wet, but they were nowhere close. We'd have a nice camping trip this weekend, a nice little excuse to fish and relax and enjoy ourselves as we explored the old Trestle. The woods around the town were full of things like that, and we'd explored old houses that had been retaken by the underbrush or abandoned vehicles that sagged amongst the leaves. When we were in the 7th grade, we even found an old concrete culvert out there that led into an underground cave that looked a little spooky in the light of our flashlights. The farther we walked, however, the less certain I was that the clouds wouldn't be a problem. The deeper into the woods we went, the more the smell of rain surrounded us. Brian smelled it too, and our pace increased as we kept heading deeper in. Maybe it was just a little rain. Maybe it was just a short downpour, and maybe we could get past it before it soaked everything. When we came to the gorge and I saw the rising skeletal edifice of the Trestle, I breathed a sigh of relief. "There she is, boys," Brian said, sounding surprised to have found it at all. "Looks pretty wrecked," Frank said, tossing a stub of cigarette into the gorge. "We aren't actually gonna go up on that thing, are we?" "Well, yeah," Brian said. "That's kind of the only reason we came here, wasn't it?" "You might, but I don't care what kind of surprise is up there," Frank said. "I ain't going." He had plenty of time to rethink his statement. Just because we had found the gully didn't mean we had made it to the Trestle. The closer we got, the more I could see that for its age, it really was in amazing shape. It was less skeletal than I had thought, and looked more like a covered metal bridge. The underside of the Trestle was a dark cave, the shadows thick and deep, and I really didn't want to explore the underside unless we really had to. Something about it made me uncomfortable, and as we got closer and closer to the base, the whole thing seemed to grow. It was mid-afternoon when we finally made it, and Brian let his pack fall as he set about climbing at once. You don't want to set up camp first?" Justin asked, taking out his tent and tools for making fire. "I just want to see the woods from up there," Brian said, looking at me as if to ask if I was coming. I let my pack slide off too, and we climbed the side of the Trestle side by side. We were laughing as the ground got further and further away, the girders lifting us above the trees until we finally crested the top and came to the old tracks of the railroad. I was full of wonder as I looked out over the woods, the Trestle spanning the entire gorge before slanting back down to the woods again. From up here, the clouds looked very dark, and I wondered if the tent would be enough to keep us from getting wet. "Check this out," Brian said, dangling his feet over the edge as he looked down into the gorge. Watching him made me slightly dizzy, and I didn't dare join him on the precipice. When he came back up, however, he had a rope with him and nodded me over to help him pull it up. It wasn't really heavy, but we were careful not to let it get stuck on anything. Brian left me to pull so that he could look over the edge and reported that the rope was attached to an old red cooler. As it came up over the edge, I saw that the rope was attached to a handle, and the whole thing was the red of a kid's wagon left out in the sun. The box was ancient, the bystander of 1,000 summer outings, and there was something inside it. Brian opened the lid and smiled as he pulled out a lukewarm six-pack of Natty Ice, a brand I was passing familiar with. Dad, a staunch Budweiser man, had always shook his head and called it piss water when he saw that it was on sale. I figured for a bunch of kids who were barely old enough to buy beer, the price was probably right, though. I assumed that Brian's brother had put it here. He had told us where to find the Trestle Bridge, after all, and as Brian fished the note out from under them, my suspicion was confirmed. Brian, this is a place where high schoolers have come to drink and hang out for generations. Our own mom and dad sat on this bridge and drank when they were in high school, and now it's your turn. I spotted you a sixer this time, but you'll have to bring your own next time. If you ever have extra, leave them in this cooler and then tuck the cooler under the Trestle Bridge. Also, don't go under the bridge. We think there might be a bear under there. Kevin. The thought of a bear so close to our campsite kind of scared me, but Brian brushed it off. He's probably just messing with us. Want one? He asked, popping the top as he offered me one. I hesitated. I'd never drank before, but I figured just one couldn't kill me. It was warm and tasted terrible, but it wasn't the worst thing I'd ever had. Brian drank his quick, laughing as he threw the can into the gorge far below. We watched it spiraling down, spilling the last few remaining drops before it clinked weakly at the bottom. As if in answer, there was a distant rumble of thunder, and from our vantage point, we saw the lightning crack in the distance. We were on a big metal structure with lightning coming in quick and rain already pattering lightly around us. We better go, I said, Brian looking at the lightning as it rumbled again. He nodded, and we decided to run down the tracks rather than try to scale back down. It would mean doubling back, but it wouldn't be a long trip, and the thought of juggling the rest of the beers and trying to climb down sounded nuts. Brian was holding the four of them close as he ran, smiling to himself as he talked about showing them to the guys. Justin's gonna flip, Brian said with an evil laugh. You know, he still won't even be around anyone who smokes because of that dumb dare pledge. He was right, too. Justin was furiously hammering in tent pegs when we arrived, looking up at the sky every time a drop hit him. He stopped when he noticed us come back with cans that clearly weren't soda. Frank must have recognized them because he laughed and commented that they had found a pretty cool surprise. Brian tossed him one, turning to Justin as he offered him one, too. Justin put a hand on his hips, looking like my mom when she was disappointed in me. Hell no, and you shouldn't either. Why would you just drink something you found on a rickety bridge? Brian blew out a long breath and popped another one. Because, Spaz, my brother left them for us. There was a note and everything, so cool your jets. Brian went back to work, mumbling darkly about being reckless and drinking things that could be poisoned or drugged. The tent came up, and not a moment too soon. The rain was really starting to come down, and it looked like there would be no fire tonight. We all headed into the tent, the wind picking up as it shoved the tent and made the ropes and pegs groan. It was big enough to fit all of us comfortably, and as the lamps came out, Brian held up the last two beers. Split the last two? He asked, everyone but Justin agreeing. We poured them into our camp cups, starting to clink them together before Brian turned to Justin. He was pretending to busy himself with something in the corner, but it was pretty clear that he didn't approve of what we were doing. Come on, Justin, it's not going to hurt you. I tell you what, if we see you becoming an alcoholic after one sip, I'll push you into the gorge and save you the embarrassment. Not funny, Justin said, but he had clearly worn him down. After another half-hearted refusal, he finally held out his cup to Justin and grinned as he poured the last of the beer into it. Then he clinked his glass with the rest of us, and we drank, everyone pulling a face which we laughed at. As the storm raged outside and we ate some MREs that we had packed just in case of bad weather, we started on our ghost stories. Brian was just telling us about a man with a hungry ghost in his basement when a big gust of wind hit the tent hard enough to collapse the middle brace and send it crashing down on us. We floundered for a minute, looking for the zipper as we tried to escape, and finally stepping out into the driving rain. It was still afternoon, the sun an angry line amidst the storm clouds, and I turned as I heard someone struggling with the tent. Justin was trying to pull it, the wind threatening to take it from him with every gust. "Come on," he shouted. "Help me get it under the trestle. It should work as a windbreak." I remembered the warning about a bear, but Brian just shouted back that it was either the bear or the rain. "Besides," he said, "if we see one, we'll just run like hell." It was hard to argue with him while the rain was coming down, so we all grabbed a tent post and moved it into the dry cave created by the trestle. Unlike a lot of train trestles I had seen in movies and on TV, this one was enclosed. I'm still not sure why, but it worked out well for us that day. We knocked in the tent pegs and sat in the tent as we watched the rain come down in buckets outside. Our stuff had gotten a little wet, but we hadn't brought anything that couldn't take a little water. As the light gave way to dark, we started breaking out the lanterns and cards, settling in for the night as we listened to the rain. As I lay there watching Justin and Brian play their 4th or 5th game of Magic the Gathering, I started hearing something besides the rain. It was a deep rumbling, like something snoring deep under the metal bridge. I thought again about Brian's brother telling us there might be a bear under there. I didn't really want to get eaten by a bear in my sleep, and if we were going to have to move again, it was better to do it now. I took out my flashlight and started looking into the shadowy depths of the trestle, but there was nothing to be seen. There was some thick-looking mud under here, some of it having made little stalagmites on the ground, but I couldn't see anything sleeping under there. It wouldn't make a very good den, I reflected, as I shone my light around. It was open on both sides, with the gorge coming in about 30 feet from our tent. There was really nowhere for anything to live down here, but as I swung the light from left to right, I could still hear that weird breathing. On a whim, I pointed it up and under the bridge, and that was when I saw it. First I thought it was a bunch of bats clustered together, but when it flinched under the beam of my light, I knew it was just one big thing. It was a huge bat, way bigger than me, with its large leathery wings pulled up tight around it. It was clinging to the bottom of the trestle bridge, and I imagined that it had been a bad spot to hang when the trains were still in order. I spotted a slight movement to its left and found a second one, hanging not far from it. In total, there were 4 of them, and when one of them shifted its wings and looked at me with a red, unhappy eye, I turned off the flashlight and zipped up the tent. The guys had some strong words when I started turning off lanterns, but I told them to be quiet and get down. "What?" Frank asked. "Did you see something out there?" "Was it the bear?" Brian asked, keeping his voice low as we hunkered down. "What bear?" Justin asked, but I waved a hand at them, trying to get them to be quiet. "It's not a bear," I hissed, but about that time, there was a weird sound from outside. It sounded like a high-pitched yawn as something came awake, followed by the rustle of wings. The talk in the tent had ceased now, and you could have heard a mouse fart. In the dark of the undercroft, we heard something huge and leathery take flight, rustling the canvas of the tent as it left the darkness. A second took flight a moment later, and I heard water cascade down as it shook the top of the trees. We all lay on our stomachs, panting for breath, as we listened for more. I had seen 4, and only 2 had left so far. When something hit the ground about a foot from our tent, Justin had to slap a hand over his mouth to stop from screaming. The hushed remnant squeaked from between his fingers like a deflating balloon, but if the creature heard it, it never showed any sign. I could see the vague outline of it as it rose to its full height, and as it flapped its wings and took flight, the tent rustled like it had been in the wind. "Is that all of them?" Brian asked, 3 sets of eyes turning my way. I started to tell them that there had been a 4th, but that was when the 4th fell on top of the tent. We were all very lucky, all things considered, It landed right in the middle of the tent, shattering the plastic pole and sending the plastic material falling down around us. The creature's toenails scrambled across it noisily as it tried to find purchase, and when it took off, I was afraid it would simply carry us off with it. Instead, it just ripped a hole in the top as it flew off, and all of us were left reeling as we lay under the canvas. After a few minutes, it was decided that we would take our sleeping bags and our backpacks and leave the tent behind. We spent a miserable night huddled under the biggest tree we could find. We probably looked like fat caterpillars as we hunkered under the roots of that big tree, but we were as dry as could be managed. We all kept looking towards the skies, afraid the giant bat things would come after us, but they never did. We didn't talk, we didn't dare, and when the sun came up, we made our way out of the woods. We arrived at my house cold, scared, and unwilling to talk about what we had seen. My parents probably thought we had run afoul of something like a bear or a cougar, but they had no idea. That was about 2 weeks ago, and we haven't been back in the woods since. Just knowing that those things are in the woods makes us not want to be there after dark. It's a shame because the woods were our spot, our sanctuary, and now it seems tainted. Brian doesn't even leave the house after sunset these days, and Justin looks at the skies when he's walking. Frank says he doesn't really want to talk about it, and I think he's stoned a lot of the time. I dream about it sometimes, the way that big red eye looked at me when I shone my flashlight on it, and I can't help but wonder what something that big eats. I think it will be a good long time before I talk any of them back into the woods, and our camping days may be at an end. Let's hope you don't have half as much trouble with bats as they did on your next outdoor excursion. Let's keep up the pace on this hike with a story about something strange found on the hiking trails of wherever these two were. Let's hear a story about the Spidermother. It was a hike that we would never forget, though we wished we could. My girlfriend and I were hiking in a familiar spot, just like we'd done 1,000 times before. This hike was going to be different, though. We would hike 3 miles in and camp for the night, wake up at 5 a.m., hike up to Helen's Overlook, about 10 minutes from our camping spot, where we would watch the sunrise. While she watched, I would take a knee, pull out a ring I had bought a couple of weeks ago, and ask her to marry me. It was all so meticulously planned that I hadn't taken something into account, something no one could have planned for. We parked in the lot at the base of the trail. I'd hiked this trail and camped in these woods for years, and it seemed like a great place to bring my girlfriend after we got together. We'd been together for about 3 years, but it had been 8 months since we'd last been up here. We had meant to go at the start of spring, the changing seasons being our favorite time to be outdoors, but life had made it difficult, and we were excited to get back up here after a long hiatus. We grabbed our packs and headed into the woods, following the trail that would take us to the spot where we meant to camp. Technically, the Park Service frowns on people camping near the state trails. That being said, the spot where we meant to camp was off the trail and into the woods a bit. A ranger could still wander up and tell us to leave, but I sort of doubted it. I had only been asked to leave once the whole time I'd been camping here, and that was on an occasion when my brother and I had built our fire a little too high. We were smarter now, and we hadn't been discovered since then. "Sure is pretty," my girlfriend said, adjusting the straps on her pack as we walked. "Yeah," I agreed, looking at her more than anything. I slid my fingers over the velvety top of the ring box as we walked. I couldn't wait to give it to her, to see her surprise as I hit one knee and see her tearful delight as she accepted. It never crossed my mind that she wouldn't. We would get married in the spring next year and come out here camping for our honeymoon as well, so we could visit the spot again. Sometimes, however, God loves to laugh at our plans. It started with spiders. More specifically, it started with me running face first into a spider web. It had been hung across the trail, and the little builders fled as I slapped at the remains that clung to my face. I checked myself to make sure it hadn't fallen onto me, and when I was certain it was gone, I shivered as we set off again. From there, my girlfriend and I found ourselves dodging webs pretty often. They were just little spiders for the most part, but as they clustered together, the webs became more annoying. My girlfriend shrieked as one clung to her hair, and as I helped her check for stowaways, I couldn't help but feel crawly. I'd seen spiders in the woods before. They lived here too, after all, but never like this. I had expected that some of the late-season snows would have gotten them, but they were here despite it all. We followed the trail, dodging spiders and looking for landmarks until my girlfriend finally said she had to pee. "I'm just gonna walk over this way. Keep an eye out for other hikers?" I told her I would, and she stepped off into the woods to do her business. When she screamed a few minutes later, I ran into the woods expecting to find a bear or a coyote or something. Instead, I found my girlfriend leaning against a tree, shaking as she pointed to something strange hanging from the tree. It looked like a cocoon, but it was practically throbbing with spiders. I had once seen a wasp's nest hanging in the woods, the big papery-looking ones, and that was what it looked like more than anything. It was hanging from a nearby tree from the thick strands of silk, but I could see something rougher wrapped around the limb, too. The spiders were scuttling all over it, and watching it made me a little bit sick. Sorry, I'm incapable of doing it justice, but there were more spiders on this cocoon or egg sac or whatever it was than I'd ever seen. They had spun webs all over the trees and the canopy, and they just kept spinning as they attempted to encase the little clearing in silk. This was their sanctuary, and they meant to keep it safe from people like us. "What the hell is it?" my girlfriend whispered. "What the hell is that thing?" I didn't know. I told her as much. As little as I wanted to get closer to it, I couldn't help but slink in as my curiosity tried to get the better of me. The closer I got, the less it looked like a wasp nest, and the more it looked like cotton candy. I know what that sounds like, but it was almost translucent, and as I stared, I could see something inside. It was nondescript, like something seen through a dirty window, but there was definitely something inside that webby bundle. I had to stop myself from sticking my hand out to touch it, and that was when I saw something else that drew my attention. I would have completely missed it if I hadn't gotten so close, but now I could see the corner of something purple. It was underneath the spider cocoon, and a few more months would have seen the bundle get big enough to cover it, too, as it came to the ground. Something translucent covered it, and I looked at the bottom of the mass as I reached out a shaky hand to grab for the thing. "What are you doing?" my girlfriend asked breathlessly, but I ignored her. My hand came shakily into contact with the thing, and it was a plastic Ziploc bag. As I lifted it up, however, the back of my hand brushed something on the bottom of the cocoon. I grimaced as something wet slid down my hand, and as I saw something black and stiff fall to the leaves, I gasped and backpedaled towards my girlfriend. As the sun shone behind the thing, I finally got a good look at what lay inside, and my suspicions were confirmed. "We gotta go," I said, helping her up. "We have to call the ranger service right now." "What is it?" she asked, but I didn't want to tell her until I was sure. We went back to the car, and I called the rangers. In the meantime, I looked in the bag I'd been clutching the whole way down the trail. It was a purple notebook, the kind you could get at Dollar General for a couple of bucks, and inside was someone's journal. Her name must have been Lisa, because she signed all of her entries with it. The more I read, the more I came to understand that this was a journal she was keeping in a mental health facility after a suicide attempt. She talked about the medication they had her on, about the groups she had attended, about the phone calls with her parents she had, and how it had all helped her see that life had meaning and that she shouldn't squander it. She had left the group home with a new lease on life, but that lease had soon run out. The last entry was made about 4 months ago, about a week before one of the worst spring storms in a decade. "I just can't take it. Charles is gone. He says he can't handle my roller coaster emotions, and he took Sophia to stay with his parents for a while. My parents are trying to be supportive, but I can see what a burden I've become to them, my husband, and my daughter. So I've decided to leave. I'm going to hike the trails that gave me joy, and when I find a spot that I'm not likely to be found, I'll end it. If anyone finds this, my name was Lisa Turner. I closed it as a Jeep rolled up into the parking lot and put it back in the bag. The Rangers were a couple of younger guys, college-aged, still very green. They told us to lead the way, and we took them up to see what we had found. They laughed as we tried to explain to them what we had found, joking that it was probably just a really big wasp nest. They shut up when we got to the spot, and they saw it for themselves. They called in a few other people, telling us to stay close just in case. They brought a fogger and some thick suits for dealing with pests. As the spiders either fell dead or fled their perch, one of the Rangers brought a ladder and started inspecting the web mass. He was an older guy and looked like he'd been doing this since pioneer times. He shook his head and asked for the limb cutters. One of the younger guys scoffed. "There's no way you can cut that limb with those, Hawk." "Don't need to," said the older Ranger, I supposed, who was Hawk. He told everyone to stand back and snip something at the top. The whole thing came down, and when it burst, I saw what I had feared inside. There was a woman in the cocoon, her body bloated and rotten-looking. She was covered in moving tumors that had burst and began spilling little spiders out of her. She had a rope around her neck, the purple marks still visible on the bloated skin. Her face looked peaceful, despite the bulges and tumors where spiders had used her as an incubator. The police were called, and I handed them the journal, told them how we had found the body. They thanked us, the Rangers telling us they would put our names in for an accommodation, but it was the old guy I was waiting for. He looked like he wanted to talk to us since he'd cut that body down, and when he leaned in close, so the others wouldn't hear, I knew he meant to impart some wisdom. "These boys haven't seen this kind of thing before, but it's not my first time. I found a hiker 2 years into my job that had been used as a nest for ground wasps. I've found corpses savaged by bears, bones built into beaver dams, hikers skewered on the new horns of sporting bucks. Nature is beautiful, but it's unforgiving. You'll eventually forget what you saw here, but never forget the lesson. Nature will take you, if it can. It will take you, reshape you, and use you for whatever it needs. Be careful when you're in the woods, and always be courteous of the natural order." My girlfriend and I hiked back to the car in somber silence, neither of us having much to say. We didn't camp that weekend, but I did propose about 3 weeks later. I did it at our favorite restaurant, an Italian place in town, where we'd had our first date. She agreed with the expected amount of tears and squeals. I guess that makes her my fiancée now, and I'm glad to have her by my side. I've tried to forget what I saw in the woods that day, but I'm always mindful of my place when I'm in nature. Who's to say who might find me if I forget? One more story, and I think the one we have left is a pretty good one, if I do say so myself. Not all hikes end with a cozy campfire and a nice meal spent around it. Sometimes the unforeseen happens, and sometimes we found the as of yet seen. So let's hear a story about what lies within the circle. I like exploring. From state parks to virgin wilderness, I love being out and seeing things. I used to go alone a lot, just communing with nature and really roughing it, but thankfully on the day in question, I had someone with me. Jake hadn't wanted to go, had said he had a bad feeling about it, but I insisted. Jake is kind of a shut-in, and I thought that some fresh air and sunshine might help him come out of his shell. Plus, it was spring. Who doesn't like hiking in spring? We were hiking in North Georgia, a state park I won't name so you don't go looking for it. It's beautiful out there. There's a river running through the gorge, places to swim and picnic, rock walls to climb if you're feeling bold, a lot of nature to commune with. We had just come to the end of the usual trail, the river continuing on, even if the marked trail didn't, and Jake looked at me oddly when I didn't turn around and go back. I want to see what's up ahead, I told him. I had never been beyond that, but I'd always wanted to. No way, he said. That's out of bounds. The sign says there are holes or unstable terrain or something. So? So it means it's dangerous. I know you're all about exploring, Chuck, but I'm not going to die today. Oh, come on. It's just a little further. Don't be a wimp. He looked like he wanted to go back, but my heckling had gotten the better of him. Just a little. Okay, but if it looks bad, we turn around. Understand? Yeah, I said, waving him off as I went past the sign and onto the unmarked trail. The signs were needless anyway, I thought. Georgia's swampy in some places, and sinkholes and subterranean caves aren't that uncommon. We'd just avoid the soft areas, and we'd be fine. I'd read online that there was a waterfall at the end of the trail, but I'd never seen it. Some hikers said that it was beautiful, that it went all the way back up the cliff, which would be a pretty long drop for a waterfall. I wanted some pictures for my travel blog, and as we walked down the trail, I just knew this was going to be a hike we'd both remember for years to come. I must not have been watching where I was going, because all the warning I got was a little cracking sound before I was suddenly in free fall. I was watching the hole in the ground get smaller and smaller as I fell, and then everything went black for a little while. When I opened my eyes, that circle of light above me was like a spotlight. I groaned as I tested my limbs, my back, my neck, and found myself mostly in good shape. My head hurt, but my arms and legs still worked. I'd fallen onto some moss or something that had probably saved my life, if not my brains, from splattering all over the floor. And as I lay there staring up at the ceiling, I saw a silhouette impose itself over some of the light. Chuck! Thank God, I thought you were dead. I'm trying to get the Rangers, but I can't get a signal. You break anything? I sat up a little, rubbing my head where a knot was forming. I felt a twinge of pain in my back, but nothing too bad. I was smart enough not to push it, though, lest I mess myself up further and unrepairably. I don't know. My back, I think. Well, that's better than most people if they fall into an underground cave, I guess. Unfortunately, I've got all the climbing hooks and you've got all the rope. I'm gonna head back up to the swimming hole and see if I can get some help. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Before I could say anything, Jake was gone, and I was left with nothing but the moss and the darkness around me. I didn't know how big the cave was, and if it was a cave at all, but the blackness just seemed deep and impenetrable. As I lay there, the pain beginning to seep into my body, I thought I heard something. It was light, no more than a tickle on my senses, but it was definitely something. It was like something with claws, walking quietly on stone, like a rat, but bigger than usual. I thought it was my imagination at first, but as it circled my spot like a shark preparing to strike, I realized I wasn't imagining it. I lay as still as I could, hoping that whatever it was would decide I wasn't interesting or edible. But when it spoke, I was taken off guard. It sounded like a woman, like a young, pretty woman. Hello? I stayed quiet, not sure what was going on, hoping it was a delusion or a hallucination. Is someone there? It sounded real, though, not like any of the voices I had ever heard in a daydream or a regular dream, and despite myself, I decided to answer. Hello? There was silence for several long breaths. Then it spoke again. Are you from up there? She asked, and I assumed she was pointing at the ceiling. Yeah, my name's Charles. What's yours? Silence. Silence. Then it spoke again. I don't have one. No one has ever called me anything. That was weird. I didn't know anyone who didn't have a name. Made me wonder how long she'd been down here and who had left her down here. Had she fallen into one of these subterranean tunnels like I had? Had she gotten trapped without any way out? I asked her, but after 2 long breaths, she told me that she didn't know. I don't remember ever not being down here. It's my home. If I lived up there, it was a very long time ago. The long pause between conversations was a little weird, but I put it out of my mind. Clearly, she didn't get a lot of chances to talk to people, and she was just remembering how to make conversation. There was nothing wrong with that. In fact, I was glad she'd found me. I didn't want to be down here all by myself, and maybe I could help her out once Jake came back. Why don't you come over here into the light? I asked, patting the stone beside my moss bed. That way I can see you. Silence. Silence. Then, I don't really like the light. It hurts my eyes and it burns my skin. That made sense, I thought. If she had been down here long enough, then she was probably kind of sensitive to light. I remembered reading about people who lived in the dark too long and go blind when you take them into the sun, and I felt foolish for asking. It was really more my sense of vanity anyway. The idea that I might be talking to some old hag had crossed my mind, but she sounded young and pretty, and I guess I just wanted to look. Is there anyone down here with you? I asked, hearing my throat click as I said it. My throat was dry, and when I reached behind me, I felt for my water bottle and realized it had rolled off in the fall. I was thirsty. I didn't know how long Jake would be gone. Hey, you don't see a clear water bottle anywhere in here, do you? There's water in it, and I'm so thirsty. Sitting in the sunbeam wasn't helping matters much, and I was scared to move or go looking for my sunscreen. I wasn't in a lot of pain, but they said that a neck or a back injury could be exacerbated if you moved. I lay there, frying like a fish, and I just knew I was going to have a wicked sunburn when I finally got out of here. When the water bottle rolled out of the darkness and bumped my hand, I had to stop myself from flinching away from it. I reached down, trying to move as little as possible, and as the water hit my throat, it was like pure honey. I splashed a little on my face, imagining I could hear the sizzle, and sighed in relief as I found some comfort from the heat. Thank you, I said, looking at the darkness as if expecting to see someone peeking at me. Silence. Silence. Then, no problem. You're the first person I've had to talk to in a long time. I don't want you to lose your voice. I smiled, glad to give her the comfort of a human voice. We talked a little, mostly involving me talking and her adding in little things every now and again. I told her about hiking and Jake, about the world above, and she seemed to enjoy my descriptions of things like TV and movies. For her part, she told me that she had lived in the tunnels down here for a while, and that she could see in the dark pretty well. She ate whatever she found in the tunnels, and I wasn't the first person to fall down here. That made me feel bad for her. None of them offered to get you out? You are the first person to be alive when you fell in. Some of them are alive for a little while, but they don't stay alive for long. No one comes for them, and they succumb to the fall. That gave me a chill. You mean they die? Silence. Silence. Then, they do not find their bodies. I told you, Charles. I eat what I find in the cave. My mouth was going dry again, but it had nothing to do with the heat. She just admitted to being a cannibal, but I suppose one couldn't hold that against her either. She was trapped down here. Food was probably not plentiful. She had to survive the best she could, but I couldn't understand how the Park Service didn't know people were going missing. How did they not collect the bodies before she got a chance to eat them? Did they just think people got lost in the park? I thought that maybe they should be a little more proactive, but Then Jake's voice whispered in my head, like putting up a sign to stay off the dangerous trail. Were you... I tried to ask, my tongue getting stuck to the roof of my mouth. Were you planning to eat me? Silence. Silence. Then... Yes, she said, not showing the slightest bit of hesitation. But you were alive, and the sun was up. I usually don't find the bodies till after dark, so there's no sun to keep me away. That made me shudder. It isn't often you get to have a conversation with someone who's planning to have you for dinner. And if the sun had been down and I was still alive, I started, but I couldn't finish the thought. I didn't have to, though. Silence. Silence. And then, yes, she said. I was quiet, not sure how to answer, but she beat me to it again. I have to eat, Charles. All creatures must eat, and I am no exception. You don't feel weird about eating your own kind? I asked, trying to find the right words so she wouldn't be offended. Silence. Silence. Then, I don't eat my own kind, Charles. I eat people. My teeth chattered a little at that. Translation, she wasn't a person, which led my mind to ask the question I didn't dare voice. What was she? What was I down here with? Even if my back wasn't injured, even if I wasn't paralyzed, something I was pretty sure I wasn't, I still had no way to get out. I could no more jump 30 feet than I could have tossed Jake the rope, and I was at her mercy, it seemed. She needn't wait until dusk, I thought, as I watched a cloud cruise across the mouth of the hole. If it started to rain, if it became overcast, even if some stray cloud covered my hole in shadows, it would be nothing for her to snatch me back into the darkness. It was a sobering realization to discover that my life was hanging so tenuously. Charles? She asked, and I heard that clicking noise getting closer. Charles, are you okay? I hadn't noticed until now, but her voice sounded artificial. It was like something approximating the sound of a voice. A speaker playing someone's voice from a video or something. It was a good copy, but I wanted to know what was making it. The longer I lay here, the less certain I was that she was a girl. The more certain I was talking to a monster. Charles, she said, and there was worry in her voice, as well as hunger. I'm here, darling, I said, making myself answer her. I was just wool gathering. I hit my head when I came down, and it made me feel a little woozy. The clicking came even closer to the circle of light, a circle that was suddenly not nearly wide enough. I do not know this word, woozy. What does it mean? Is it like being tired? Yeah, I said, yeah, it's a lot like being tired. I kept looking up, hoping to see Jake and the Rangers up there. How long had it been? It had to have been at least half an hour. I couldn't imagine that no help had come in half an hour. Even if he had to walk all the way back to the station at the trailhead, someone should have come along by now. I didn't know if they could stop her from dragging me off and eating me, but I really hoped so. Charles? Yeah, I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I thought it did. Are you afraid? I had to stop myself from answering with a big old Texas-sized hell yes, since that might provoke her. Nah, darling. Why would I be scared? The clicking came up to the edge of the light, slow and unsure, and I imagined that I could see something there, just beyond the shadows. A face or something. It did not look at all human. It looked like a bad driftwood carving of a strange idol from a heathen tribe outside of civilization, and I found it hard not to stare at the spot. Your heart is beating very fast. Your blood is pumping through your veins like a river. I can hear it. It's making me hungry. Are you afraid of me? I opened my mouth to deny it, but that was when someone called my name, and a shadow imposed itself across the light. It felt like too much, and I wanted them to move away as they blotted out some of the light. "Chuck!" Jake yelled. "Are you okay?" "Sure, great," I lied, glancing over to see the face I hadn't seen was gone. Someone else cast a shadow over me, and I was shaking as my light was cut off by half. "Chuck, my name's Ranger Mike, and I'm here to help. Ranger Gabe and I are going to rappel down. Is your back or neck injured?" I don't think so," I yelled, listening for the clicking and the voice of the not woman. I think I just hit my head." Mike talked to someone up there, and they concurred. "We're going to drop down flares so we don't get stuck. Close your eyes, okay?" I nodded, but there was no way in hell I was going to close my eyes with that thing around. It was strange how quickly she had become it, and how little I wanted to bring her back up with me now. I had no idea what I'd been talking to, and suddenly I didn't want to know. I wanted out of this hole, out of this hell, and I promised whatever was listening that I would never scoff at signs there to keep me safe again. If they would get me out of here, I might never even come back to the woods again. The flares came down, and I saw the cave was much bigger than I had thought it was. The flares sent up ghostly light, casting everything in flickering illumination, and that was when I saw it. It was only for a second, as it retreated down a side passage, but I caught a glimpse of what I'd been talking to. The driftwood carving analogy wasn't far off, the whole thing looking white and thin and kind of fragile looking. It walked around on these long, thin legs that looked like nothing so much as pure bone, and its eyes were high up in its bony forehead. It looked at me almost apologetically as it left, but the two rangers who rappelled down never so much as glanced into the cave. They had me up on a stretcher before I could warn them, and after securing it to the ropes, they had all three of us winched up as the flares burned in the darkness below. There were more rangers at the top, paramedics too, and they got me up topside, and I was dragged to stable ground as I was checked out by the EMTs. They said the bruise on my head was nasty, but there probably wasn't any brain damage. My spine appeared fine, though they wouldn't know for sure until I had an EKG, and my neck felt okay too. Ultimately, they said I was very lucky, and I told them they didn't know the half of it. I'm in a hospital room now, waiting for my EKG, but just wanted to get this down while it was fresh. I can't prove that it wasn't a hallucination. The ER doc said I was definitely concussed, but I think it was real. I talked with something under the ground, something that would have eaten me if it hadn't been for the light encircling me. I was extremely lucky in a lot of ways, and I thank God that I made it out with little more than cuts and bruises. If I hike again, I'll be paying more attention to the signs from now on. You never know what you might find just below the surface. And just like that, our stories are done for another day. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll be back very soon with more cozy horror, just for you. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.